Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are talking about the Bad Batch Episode 6. It is right now 2:33 a.m. in the morning Central Time. That means this episode has been out for exactly 33 minutes. We watched it, we thought about it, we're about to talk about it, and then maybe we'll go to sleep, but who knows. First, a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm your host. Folks, I'm going to be honest. The Bad Batch coverage, I know we've been kind of a little all over the place in terms of who the guests have been. We had a plan about, working with the folks from the Animation Deliberation podcast. We're still doing that as much as we can. Then kind of schedules got wonky. Then we thought maybe we would do live recordings of it. Then there was MODOK, and then schedules got wonky again. And now I have to actually hit the road at noon tomorrow, or also known as today, also known as in 10 and a half hours. So we just thought, you know what, we're going to go ahead and record it. I think we thought, we got wires crossed with another person we thought was going to join us, but right now we have myself, Paul Hoppy. We're kind of going back to basics to talk about the Bad Batch. So, Paul, it's only 12:30 where you're at, so you are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I'm sure. How you doing today, and what you thinking about the Bad Batch episode?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm ready to kick it old school. I enjoyed this episode. I've been enjoying the show overall. There's only like one thing that I'm like, all right, okay, I guess we're gonna do that. But overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm enjoying the journey being kind of a slow, not really in a hurry to get to a place. Kind of, it's about the process sort of feeling for me.
I think I'm coming around to that. I'm still, one or two episodes ago, I thought we were doing the journey, but it was going to be that kind of, every episode was episodic, but also moved the kind of overall story ahead a little bit. And we've now had, I think, 2, maybe 3 episodes in a row where there was no Crosshair, no Tarkin, nothing about kind of what's happening back in that world. And I'm definitely missing it a bit. I wish we were getting more of that story. But it is possible that, there's not, we kind of know where they're supposed to wind up, so maybe there's not that far for it to go. And I think now we're more getting that it's not actually quite that same story arc, although now maybe we're getting more the arc of, the very beginning of the rebellion, which we're sort of seeing a little bits here. And that probably, Crosshair is just going to come back for the last 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah, and maybe, show up every, 3 to 5 episodes or something like that. Who knows?
Right. I mean, that's the other thing, is that I think the recent Marvel shows have kind of taught it, we're kind of having to go back to more episodic TV. We are 6 episodes in. We're not halfway into the season yet.
That's true. There's not a lot of shows these days that have this many episodes, right?
Right.
You see a show that has 10 episodes, you're like, oh, that's longer than these 8 episode or 6 episode series. Yeah. So, yeah, it's you're probably not going to have a 16-part arc. You're going to have a lot of what some people would call filler episodes. And if the writing's not that good, it'll feel that way. But I feel like each of the episodes has done something to develop the characters, to move their arc forward without moving this big plot heavy arc forward.
Right. And certainly we got one hell of a cliffhanger in terms of the who a character is.
Right. But yeah, a teaser kind of.
For those who haven't seen the episode, I just want to kind of follow along. Let me give you kind of a quick summary, and Paul, as always, fill in the gaps. So our heroes are still hanging out with Sid, where they were from last episode. Omega is now trying to learn the laser bow that she kind of picked up at the end of the last episode. And at first she's kind of hitting some shots, and then she's having trouble, and she's struggling. And it's in part because she her arms aren't quite strong enough, and she's having trouble with that. And we have some fun moments there. And Sid then once again kind of makes it very clear this team works for her, and she's got a mission for them. And there's some kind of back and forth of, oh, we don't know if we're working for you. And Sid just says, no, you're working for us. That's decided. And what Sid wants is the head of a battle droid. The tactical droid. We saw the tactical droids a lot in the Clone Wars, some in Rebels. Actually, no, not in Rebels. In the Clone Wars. And
there was one in Rebels, I think. Spoiler alert.
I think it's right, yeah. And they learn is what they can do, and they're very good tacticians. And they were often involved in some of the better battles of the where the droids were able to fight better. My English is very good at 2:30 in the morning. So
Droids fight good with bad tactic, droid.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, they our heroes go to the planet to try and go to this place where the droids are being melted down. Because once again, apparently big pits of lava are just like a thing in the Star Wars universe.
So many pits of lava.
Once again, workplace safety conditions, like where is OSHA? There's just nothing of that. And then we get basically a 15-minute battle. And while they're fighting with the security droids and they're fighting with others, trying to basically steal the head of this droid, because the head is where its computer is, that's all they need. And along the way, they run into the Martez sisters. The Martez sisters, if you were a fan of the Clone Wars, they showed up in Season 7. Two great characters who interacted with Ahsoka Tano. We'll talk more about them in a bit. But they're kind of like, people on the outs, kind of on the scum and villainy side of things, but with a good heart. And it turns out they are also trying to steal the head of this tactical droid. So, fight, shoot, banter. Our heroes are working against the Martezes, but then they have to work together, and then they're being upset at each other, and then they're working together again. And at the end of the day, it basically ticks all the boxes that you'd expect. Wrecker gets pretty much knocked out of the fight. It seems like very much a video game thing. Like, his health bar is really low. He takes a number of laser shots. And he's like, okay, I need to lay down for a while. He says at one point, good soldiers, as though it's like the good soldiers follow orders. And he kind of hears that sentence in his head from Crosshair. So all the stuff we've been thinking about in terms of the chip in his head still being active, I think we're definitely seeing more of that. But he then gets to come save the day at a fun time. Rafa, one of the Martez sisters, says, like, oh yeah, he's the one I like. Omega gets to figure out just how to use the bow just at the right time. The droids, they use the tactical droid to get battle droids to come into the fight and help them, which is a fun moment, especially because they don't say the evil two words. So that wasn't too bad. Omega almost falls in the lava. We learn that once again, in the Star Wars universe, physics works that proximity to extreme heat is completely safe.
Totally fine.
As long as you don't physically touch the heat.
Yeah.
Which I'll have to remember next time. And then we get away. We learn towards the end that the Martez sisters they want the battle droid, not just like to sell it to whoever, but because they're trying to help people fight the Empire. And at the very end, they lose the head, but Hunter, Tech was able to download the data from the droid. Hunter decides to give it to them because they're doing it for a good cause. They have a little bit of a conversation about, what does a good soldier do in this point in time? And then as the Martez sisters fly away, they are talking to a hologram who seems to be wearing a robe of perhaps Jedi, sort of robe. And saying, like, hey, we worked with some droids, they seem to be on our side. And then just when you think the camera is going to show the face of the person in the robe, but of course it's not, credits.
Right. A little Force music there, too, I think. It was like the first half of the theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say steal or rescue the the tactical droid head.
It was about to be destroyed. That's legit. Although, take all the data from its head and then throw it right back on the trash heap. Rescue, not quite as much.
I mean, it was more of a rescue mission, and then it got shot in the head after they extracted the data, and were like, we don't need the head.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Martez sisters for a second, because I loved them in Clone Wars. They only showed up in this 4-episode arc with Ahsoka Tano when she was kind of on the run, and they're presented as kind of being, they're some of the first civilians Ahsoka comes into contact with, and they don't love the Jedi the way everyone thinks they do.
Yeah.
The way she thinks like all the civilians do, and they become kind of the voice of the people who are like, this Clone Wars, it's just a Jedi, ego trip, and it's hurting all of us. Earlier today, Paul and I recorded a different episode where we were talking about, among other things, what happens when heroes, collateral damage, and we talked about Wakanda, where Wanda tries to save one group of people, and in doing so basically puts a different group of people in danger, and they all die. And pretty much that's the exact story of the Martez family. That there was a moment in the Clone Wars, it's kind of a fun callback to something that happened many seasons ago, but where Cad Bane, a bounty hunter, was trying to rescue Zero the Hutt, break him out of prison. They knocked a transport ship out of the air. It was going to crash on a crowded platform, and a Jedi diverted the ship away from the crowded platform into a building, and in that building were the Martez sisters' parents. And the Jedi came along and basically said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, thoughts and prayers," and, left the Martezes feeling kind of bitter about the Jedi.
Yeah. So just one detail, I think, is Nigeria, right? Where Wanda...
Yeah. What did I say?
Wakanda.
Oh, yeah. It is a group of Wakandan students in Nigeria.
Yeah, exactly.
Get killed.
Among others, but that's
right.
one of the reasons that T'Chaka is so, involved, right? I had kind of forgotten that aspect of their backstory. I kind of just remembered, like, they didn't like Jedi until they met Ahsoka, and they're like, all right, you're okay. So it's interesting kind of seeing them on the side of the rebellion here, or the budding rebellion, like, that they didn't really like the Jedi, and they didn't really seem to like the Republic that much, but they're also really not down with the Empire,
Right.
So, but they're from Coruscant, right? So I would imagine when the Empire starts getting really empire-y, they might be some of the first people affected, right? They live on that core system, or planet.
One thing that Clone Wars had kind of established is that, Coruscant was not a bastion of law and order, that there was a thriving underworld, and that there was a lot of, kind of people doing kind of like shady things and living shady lives, and kind of existing not as like full-on criminals, but, kind of, cutting corners when they need to.
Yeah.
And my impression is that the Martez sisters were very much that, sometimes getting into more trouble than they needed, sometimes being okay. And yeah, I'm guessing the Empire is really cracking down on that and being much more like, nope, everything's going to be by the book now. And that's when the Martez sisters are like, F this, we need to, get involved with something else.
Right, exactly. And especially the older sister, right, I think was more into, like, kind of got them into some shit, whereas the younger sister was more like, I want to work on my spaceship and then see the stars. And, I mean, I guess good thing that she got that spaceship running. I guess we saw the same ship, right? That's the same ship?
I'm pretty sure, I think it's called the Silver Angel.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like we didn't get as satisfying a shot of it, or maybe I just wasn't thinking about it then. But yeah, I really enjoyed seeing them show up. Like, as soon as I was like, okay. So obviously, like, the cloaked figure, my first guess would be that it would be Ahsoka, because if it's some sort of, Force-y type person.
Right.
I mean, Obi-Wan's off living that harsh desert life, I think, right. by now. But, I mean, we'll see. But I think that's the most likely.
This is like a week after things. We don't really know how much time has passed. So it might be a week. It might be a couple weeks. Obi-Wan might still be in transit to Tatooine at this point. We don't really know.
I feel like it's probably been a little longer than that. Because I mean, we've had a few missions, right?
Yeah, I think that's actually right. I think we've gotten the sense we're probably a couple of months into the Empire's takeover.
Although, like, Star Wars and time, who knows?
Also, yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, I think Ahsoka is a good bet, and it would be certainly we know we're getting a lot more of her character over the next couple of different shows, and so I think it would be kind of fun to, that's interesting because we know she shows up in more animated stuff. Like, I was sort of wondering, I think she's still too young that they wouldn't have Rosario Dawson voice her. They would still have the person who voiced her animated person.
For sure.
Persona. So, yeah, I think that could be fun. What else kind of jumped out at you from this episode?
So a couple things on Omega. Could use a helmet, I think.
Could use a helmet.
It's the kind of classic, we want to show this character's face, so we're not going to protect their cranium.
Yep.
Also, I feel like, isn't a bow a lot harder for a kid to use than a blaster?
Yeah, especially since...
She was so good with the blaster.
Yeah, I hope there's an explanation for this, but I feel like it might well be that her aim has the power of plot right now, that, like, she's good at aiming. Because in the first block of episodes, the first time she ever uses a blaster, she shoots the rifle out of Crosshair's hands with, like, perfect accuracy. Now but you're right, also, a blaster doesn't take arm strength.
Right.
A bow, they talk about her needing stronger arms, which apparently she does, like, 50 million dumbbell curls while she's on the ship, because now she has strong arms again.
Yeah.
I I get the idea that like she found this bow, and so she's kind of like weapon bonded to it.
Right.
I think that's that's a thing. In,
very D&D quest.
Yeah,
kind of
video
thing.
games. You pick it up, you can't give it to somebody else now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure. It did seem a little silly to me that she's the one who has to learn the bow, but she gets to learn it, and I think it's cool to get to see a new kind of weapon. We saw bows like that being used on Dathomir in the Clone Wars and other episodes, but we haven't really seen one of our heroes use it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels a little bit like they wanted to sell a toy.
Yeah,
to be honest.
That's also very, very possible.
But I do like, I like diversity in weapons in any kind of action story, right? I think when you have different characters who have different styles, and if they have weapons, if they have different weapons, I think it's just much more visually interesting. And also just from a story standpoint, different characters having different styles, there's just kind of more things you can do with it, and it makes fight scenes feel a little less dramatic. And I mean, one of my complaints about a lot of stuff these days is like you just get so much, you either get like this dark action where you can't see what's going on, or you get just like energy blast versus energy blast, and it's like, okay, I've seen energy blasts against each other like a lot of times now, like show me something new, like that weird kick move where like Mando kicks up the spear and hits Chicken Man with with the bottom of the spear. Like every time I see something, I'm like, oh, that's some new shit, and so I appreciate it visually.
There were definitely episodes, especially in the early seasons of the Clone Wars, where you had a bunch of droids on one side of the screen, a bunch of clones on the other, and then it looked like they just gave 2 6-year-olds a red and blue marker and let them just like draw lots of like laser lines.
Right.
So yeah, it's nice to see some more battles like that.
Yeah. So no.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, speaking of droids, I felt like a little emotional when all the droids got like reanimated.
Okay.
So like they're showing. I know how you feel about the battle droids. I feel different. Partially because I watch them in Spanish where they say entendido instead of like Roger Roger, right?
Right.
And they didn't say that this episode. But like they're being massacred. Like, decommissioned, sure, but it's like it's genocide minus like genes. They don't have genes.
Right.
But we see, they've been played for comedy so much, but in a way where they're clearly aware of like their own mortality.
Right.
There's a level of self-awareness that's played for comedy that, I don't know, like, if you give it too much thought is pretty upsetting, but, like, seeing them all, like, reanimated, and then they're, and then they're fighting on the same side as the clones, right, as the Bad Batch, and the Bad Batch are like, oh, well, this is different,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wrecker says, like, what a strange experience this is, but that he's here for it.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like, I felt that. Like,
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you felt that. I definitely agree that the humor of their being like, oh no, as they like, get thrown off cliffs and stuff like that. On the episodes we did on this podcast about the Clone Wars, Riki, Sarah, and I definitely went into like how uncomfortable that made us.
Yeah.
I am still in that place where I saw them start to, come to life, and I just cringed, and I was like, don't say the R word twice, no!
Right.
And they had a couple of moments of being a little like, did we win the war? And I was like, shut up, go away. So I didn't have the emotional response you did, but they didn't say the bad words, and maybe next time I watch it, I'll be able to have more of that, connection. I'm glad you definitely did. I think I'm just a little scarred by having watched... I did also just watch all 7 episodes of the Clone Wars like much more recently than you did.
That's true.
So a couple of things I noted. I hope we get more of this at some point, but right now I think it's very interesting how quickly. Granted, the Bad Batch have always been kind of separate from the clones, but they are still clones, and such a strong ethos of the clones is like, you are my brother. We're all together against everyone. And it does feel like the Bad Batch have very quickly accepted the idea that the other clones are their enemies, and now they're just the enemy. Like at one point, I think it was Echo who says, with clones now serving the Empire, knowing how to defeat them just went up in value.
Right.
Was that something you were struck by at all?
No, not really. But I hear you on that. I one thing I noticed was that they were like set to stun when they were shooting the humans on this mission.
Yeah.
But I think like that didn't strike me, but I feel like maybe it didn't strike me partially because I feel like the Bad Batch have never liked Regs, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I think they do feel like they are brothers, and then the rest of the clones are like annoying cousins. Is kind of how I see it. Like, they're like, oh, all of you, and like Echo is a little bit of a special case, and they got some respect for Rex along the way, but you know, they like in that one, you know, in season 7 of the Clone Wars, but I do feel like they definitely feel different about the other clones than, and I feel like they established that a little bit in the kind of pilot movie episode, right. You know, where like the clones, you know, the Regs or whatever, are like being assholes, and they're like, get out of the way. And I think Tech is like, no, nothing's changed. It's like everything's still the same.
Yeah,
but
I
think
it's really fair. Yeah, and we've been developing that a little bit. On a similar note, though, you mentioned that the humans, they use stun settings against them. We had a couple moments of, like, workers running around the factory, you know, being clearly very scared. I liked that because I think often in these situations, it's very easy to fall into anybody who is ever in the way of our heroes must be working for the Empire and thus bad and worthy of being killed.
Right.
And here, I think we pretty clearly saw, like, these people are innocent bystanders, and, like, they shouldn't be killed. And even though, like, yes, they are working for a facility that's doing work that helps the Empire.
They're genociding droids.
Yeah, you know, like, they're workers. They're doing what they do, and they're trying to get a paycheck.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, because you're on this genociding thing, I'm now like, does that mean they're just following orders? Like,
right? You're like, oh shit,
far.
This sounds like I'm justifying Nazis. I mean,
I don't think that the genocide of the droids is a topic I'm as worked up as you are. So I'm able to be like, no, look, they're doing their jobs,
right.
And I like that the show at least is able to make that kind of a differentiation.
I agree. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but yeah, I you know, I can't turn back.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I mean, they're just doing their job, but like, it's like, is this a job that should be done? But like, yeah, I understand they're in this oppressive empire now, and like, they were just working at a facility like this. Like, what was this facility doing before? Like, did it just get repurposed? Like, what's up with all the lava?
I think it's a scrapyard. I think that there's lots of places where they have, like, this is the way they dispose of metal.
Right. I mean, there has to be tons of droids that have been destroyed before.
Right, yeah, so I think it's like where they take droid parts and stuff. Apparently recycling is just not a thing. Like, you don't sort cans, you don't, like, do things with droid metal parts to send them to recycling. Like, we're just not environmentally conscious in this part of the galaxy.
I mean, unless they're just melting it all down in some sort of fashion where that then they can turn it into... Maybe this is a recycling plant.
No, okay, that's possible. You know, that's certainly possible.
I don't know.
Yeah. A couple of little things... what did you think of that moment of Wrecker saying, like, good soldiers, and then hearing Crosshair's voice? Is that definitely about his chip acting up again?
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it. Like,
yeah.
Like, Wrecker's... I didn't know that was...
You don't like?
Huh?
You were saying at the beginning there was something you didn't like. Is that what it is?
That is the thing. That was the thing. Like, from the first time he got the headache, I was like, oh, here we go. This is definitely going to be a thing, and I'm not going to like it. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely a thing. And the level to which I don't like it will depend on what the consequences of it are, basically. Whether I find it annoying or, like, I get mad at the show. But, like, it's just, that's not the show I want, you know? And, like, I get it. It's some kind of, like, they're trying to build some kind of suspense in terms of, like, where things are going to go. And maybe there will end up being some infighting within the team because of it. And I don't know. I mean, I'll reserve final judgment until we see how it actually plays out. But, like, it just feels to me like that's not going to go in... I mean, it's not going to go in a direction that the characters are going to enjoy.
Right.
And I feel like I will probably be right there along with them like, oh, this isn't a good But yeah, I couldn't tell. It's interesting, and maybe this is a credit to D. Bradley Baker, who just, if you listen to the last episode, I'm not trying to cancel. I was just trying to, make people just give a thought to, some things. But I listened to this episode in Spanish just now, and I thought that was all Wrecker saying that. I didn't realize that was Crosshair. So maybe the characters, they are, I think, all voiced by the same person. But maybe that person isn't doing quite as an effective job of making it clear who each of the different voices are.
And I'll also say, I was watching subtitles, so it very clearly popped up, like, Crosshair's voice saying this.
Okay. That helps, too.
I did hear the difference in the voice, but I also don't know, like,
if you would have without.
The timing of subtitles, often it comes up like a half second before you actually start hearing. Subtitles often have terrible comic timing.
Oh, so bad.
but also there, like, and so, maybe it's that I was listening for Crosshair's voice because of that, but I don't think, like, it did sound like a distinctive voice in English, at least.
I'm so sad now, though, that we did the podcast referencing Jupiter's Legacy, and I never used the phrase ethereal tinkling.
Oh, God, yeah. We're moving on. We're just moving right on.
Ethereal tinkling.
Nope. Fired. You're fired. Yeah, I think I'm not as against the Wrecker storyline as you are, but I'm definitely nervous about it. And I actually just quickly scanned the Facebook chat in the Stranded Panda group. You're all doing a great job. You're putting spoiler warnings, but people are kind of sharing their thoughts on Wrecker, and some people are worried about it as well. I think for me, the thing is that I do like stories of divided loyalties. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's a very interesting story of when you are soldiers in an army and there's basically been a coup d'etat at the top, where is your loyalty? Like, do you keep following the orders of by the laws of the Republic, the transference from Republic to Empire is legal. Emergency powers were voted, and then he, was given the power to make these declarations, and he made the declarations that he had the power to do. But obviously also we always know it's completely legitimate for all these kind of awful reasons. Even that you might be like, he's kind of taking that, state of emergency and stretching it pretty far there. But, like, I could easily imagine a lot of soldiers being like, look, this is our job to try and figure it out. Yeah. This is the commander-in-chief. This is who we take orders from. And so I would like there to be, like, Order 66 fades a little bit, and now we're kind of back to just thinking soldiers. And there's some real conflict among the clones about, like, who wants to follow, this, or who's like, nah, this doesn't feel right to me anymore.
Right. Like the rest of the clones.
Right, exactly. And then the Bad Batch and Crosshair all kind of getting mixed up in that. I think part of what I think you've said this before, and I'm now much more even on that side. Mind control makes that conversation completely irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Because now there is no agency. It's just your chip works or your chip doesn't.
Right.
And in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, there's just a little bit of, like, the very best clones can kind of overcome it with help, but mostly they need, like, just 30 seconds of holding out so that Ahsoka can knock them out and then take the chip out of their head.
Right.
But for the most part, it's like, either the chip works or it doesn't, and you either do the one thing or you don't. So if they can give some agency to it, if they can get us into a situation where both Wrecker and maybe even just those two or maybe others, but like with both Wrecker and Crosshair are both sort of being pulled in both directions, and I think pretty clearly it'll be that Wrecker and Crosshair both come back to, the Bad Batch side, but we don't know for sure. I think that's a story I would enjoy. But I think if it does just become about, like, fix the chip and he's good, break the chip and he's bad, that's not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, so I feel like Wrecker pretty clearly is not, like, of his own volition wanting to go along with the Empire and, Order 66. I think with Crosshair, it's like they say, maybe his inhibitor chip, whatever it is, works a little better. But it feels also like maybe, he's the sniper, like, I don't know, like, maybe that was partially agency, right? Deciding kind of, like, maybe it wasn't entirely the chip. So,
that's certainly what I thought it was, yeah. That he was sort of the most, like, they tell us to kill the Jedi.
Right, exactly. And so, like, Wrecker, I feel like, if the chip ends up being this really big plot thing, I don't really enjoy that. I think a story where all the characters have agency and are debating things the way you're saying, I think is great. I vastly would prefer that to all of this chip stuff. And I kind of think it would be very interesting if, like, they somehow capture Crosshair, they take the chip out, and he's still like, you should have killed that Padawan, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think that would be interesting if it's not just like, oh, I got the chip out. Oh, okay, I'm good now, you know? And I and I also think it would be interesting if they end up engaging some of the clones, the other clones, and, you know, trying to get them to defect. And,
right.
You know, if some of them can have more agency. And particularly, I don't know. I mean, is there going to be a decommissioning? You know? AKA a clone genocide? Like, yeah. And that might feel a little different than, like, killing all the droids. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, whatever, they're just clones, you know?
Right. I think it's true. I think I would just say, for one thing that I think is part of this is the droids are all turned off at the time they're being killed.
For sure.
Decommissioned, so there isn't, like, the active suffering in the moment. But yeah, I think there's a whole other thing we can get down into there.
Yeah, no, there's definitely differences. I will acknowledge differences. I just think the differences aren't as categorical.
Right. They've clearly introduced the concept of sentience as part of the droids, and I think that has to have some moral value somewhere along the way. There's just one other line from the show that I wanted to highlight, because I think it's part of all this conversation we're getting into about, like, what's going to happen with Wrecker and Crosshair and agency and stuff like that. And it's funny because literally just a couple of hours ago, you and I and Jessica Plummer were recording this episode that will come out in like a week and a half from when this episode will come out, but all about this concept of, you know, superheroes and like, when should they use lethal force, and like, should they have a code that tells them exactly what to do, or should they have, like, you know, should they have to make hard decisions instead of just following this rigid code? And so as part of that, I loved that Hunter says, you know, as he's having this conversation with Rafa, I think that's how you pronounce it, Rafa, right? Rafa Martez?
Yeah.
Yeah. As he's having this conversation with Rafa, the older of the Martez sisters, and she's kind of talking about how she's helping the people fighting the Empire. She's not just out for money. And he says, things were clearer when we were just soldiers. And I just love that line, because I think it's one of those that, I mean, it has so much significance for our own world, for like any kind of military situation. That's always the case. You think of, like, Captain America, when he was just, you know, oh, Nick Fury tells me to do this, I'm going to do it. You know, before he started to have his eyes opened. Like, you know, all the stuff we talked about in terms of Jupiter's Legacy and stuff like that. I think it's such an interesting theme of, when you're a soldier and you're just following orders, you don't have to ask questions, which is, I think what we're highlighting is that that's always bad, but especially for them now, when they're not following orders, they have to follow their own lead. This is a lot more complicated. Yeah,
for sure. And they have just, like, no experience with it, right? I mean, their life to this point, to the point when they left, is like, they were born in test tubes, basically, right? Out of test tubes. And then they were raised in this very sterile, like, just taught to be a soldier environment. And then they were soldiers. And that was every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they're not as old, actually, in terms of experience as, you know, a non-clone human, right? Because their aging has been accelerated. So they haven't even had as much time to, even while following orders, to have thoughts and feelings and experience the world.
I've talked before about how it's not official, because these books are now part of Legends, they're not official canon, but there's a series of novels called Republic Commando that's about kind of a core group of, you know, clones, but it also gets a lot into just, like, the inner life of clones in general. And one of the things it talks about is, like, clones talking about, like, what would we do after the war?
Right.
You know, because that's never been assumed, and, like, clones kind of, like, going out into Coruscant when they're on leave and having no idea what to do. For a number of reasons, I'm hoping we get at least one or two episodes that are now, probably still have the Bad Batch in them, but are primarily on Coruscant, like, showing, like, what Crosshair's going through, what Tarkin's doing. I kind of love it, though, if we see, like, some clones just, like, trying to live their life in Coruscant, figure out what life is like outside of being in this army. And because it's such a disaster, that's part of, you know, why Tarkin and the Empire are like, you know what, maybe we decommission these folks as well.
Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting, probably super depressing story.
That's unfortunately probably true. Well, I want to hear if you have any kind of last comments, but I'll because of that, I'll end on one happy note.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, just go for it. I've had I've had a day.
That's fine.
We're only about 50% longer than the media itself that we're discussing. So.
Yeah. When Paul and I have now, within the last 8 hours or so, recorded a full podcast, and then also recorded a Twitch stream talking about poker and queer representation in media. So we've been doing a lot today. Definitely check out both of our Twitch streams. We'll pawn that at the end. Poke that at that. I don't know what the hell the word. We'll do something about that at the end.
We'll promote it. I also streamed for an hour and a half, as I do every day at 10 a.m. Pacific, noon Central. Okay, there. You don't have to do anything. Zen Madman at Twitch.
It's a great stream. Check it out. My stream is The Ethical Panda. I'm streaming mostly Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays around 9 or 9:30 p.m., but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I think that sound captured the vocal of my hands going up in a shrug, and who knows.
Yeah, no, I saw it in my mind's eye. There's a lot of body language in that sound.
We're now at 3 a.m. Anyway, I am convinced that somewhere in the writer's room for the show, before they had penned a single episode, someone said, look, given the name of the character, at some point in one of these 16 episodes, a character, someone is going to say something, and then someone else is going to repeat something, and a character is going to say, is there an Echo in here? And Echo's going to say yes. And then they all went, that's a brilliant joke, and they just went okay, what episode did we stick it into? Because when it happened, I laughed, and I was also that's the most obvious joke in the world. How did I not know to expect that joke at some point? But then again, the character was also the Clone Wars, and how did I in some degree, the patience they had to not make that joke through all of the Clone Wars and to finally use it now, it was brilliant. I loved it.
I don't think that joke was in the Spanish version, so I missed it.
Okay, yeah.
Now I'm sad. What part of the episode was it? I need to find it. I need to find this joke that is this ray of hope. George Lucas said to Dave Filoni, you have to give children hope. And this joke is hope that if you have this kernel of an idea for a joke, someday it may blossom.
It's at one point when one of the Martez sisters, I think it's Rafa, is talking to a couple of the clones, and they're arguing back and forth, and kind of one of them repeats something the other has said. And this is before Rafa's been introduced to them, and Rafa says you said that. Is there an Echo in here? And Echo just looks up and goes, yes.
Yes.
So good.
Nice.
Made me so happy. So, anyway, that's all we're going to say about this episode. We want to know what you have to think. I'm so tired. And I'm going to edit this before I go to bed tonight.
Yeah, but leave that part in because
of course. No, we're not cutting any of this out. It's all an outtakes episode. Anyway, we'd love to know what you think. You can find us on, you can email theethicalpanda@gmail.com. We'd love feedback, love comments, critiques. Tell us what you love. Tell us what you don't. Tell us who you think is in the robe. Tell us any of the things you think are coming up. We'd love to hear more about that. You can also find us on Facebook or on Twitter at The Ethical Panda. As Paul mentioned, he is Zen Madman. Just go at Zen Madman. You can find him on Twitch, on Twitter, lots of places like that. Lots of awesome stuff that he's doing about poker and things like that. I'm streaming now at The Ethical Panda on Twitch.tv. There you can hear me There you can find me talking about poker and the kind of issues we talk about here. Kind of, balancing it back and forth, trying to have some fun. If you like podcasts like this, you want to find more like them, definitely check out strandedpanda.com. There you'll find podcasts about the Marvel Universe, the Star Trek Universe, my ethics podcast, Bingers Assemble, which is talking about, any kind of sequel that's out there. We're probably reviewing all the stuff that came before so that we can jump right on the newest thing that comes out. They've done stuff about Godzilla and Kong. They're getting ready to do stuff about Dune. All kinds of great stuff. So, on behalf of myself, Paul, thank you all so much. Go to sleep.
Not if you're driving, though.
No, not if you're driving.
Who's in the robe?
Yeah, I did want there to be a, what's in the box? Who's in the robe?
Wait, you were hearing that too?
Oh, yeah, I totally was.
I was like, who's in the robe? But then I was like, oh, we've got that other closer. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to sleep. Have a wonderful trip wherever you go. I will upload this immediately.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks. Bye.